Hi, this is Casey Tavasian.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Colonel Lee Schiller of the Watervliet Arsenal.
This is Chief Ron Boysford.
Hi, this is Paul Tonto.
Thank you for watching WVLT, Channel 17.
Hi, I am Lisa Puglisi, the Director of Public Housing for the Buffalo Field Office. If you are interested in HUD homeownership programs or in any of our other fair housing programs, please contact the Watervliet Housing Authority or visit the HUD website at hud.gov. Our mission is to provide safe, affordable, decent housing to all of our residents. Thank you for watching WVLT Channel 17.
Hi, I am Jeffrey Claremont, and today Aaron and I will be interviewing Assemblyman John McDonald of the 108th Assembly District. How are you today, Assemblyman McDonald?
I'm doing great, Jeffrey. How are you?
I'm good. What was your first political office?
Mayor of the City of Cohoes. I was elected in 2000.
Did you always want to be involved in politics? What led you to seek political office?
Well, to be honest with you, I never really had an interest. Why don't we lower that just a little bit? Yeah. We never really had an interest in politics growing up, and even when I was practicing pharmacy. But during the 1990s, the city had some troubling times, and because I worked with the community an awful lot, people said, geez, why don't you give some consideration to running for mayor. So that's why I ran for office. I wanted to make my community a little bit of a better place.
What do you miss most about being mayor of the city of Cohoes?
Oh, that's a long list. I love being mayor because you're able to help people out an awful lot. You know, whether you're working with the different agencies in the city, the different organizations, or the constituents, you're able to really make a difference in their lives, and I really do miss that job, even though I enjoy the role I now have too as well.
What is the difference between the duties as mayor and as a state assemblyman?
Mayor, you're the executive. You're in charge. You're responsible to implement all the laws that have been passed and to implement the rules and regulations of the community to make sure that the garbage trucks run, that the firemen put out the fires, and the cops arrest the bad guys and the bad girls. In the legislature, it's a little bit different. First of all, you deal with a full compendia of issues, and you have to vote on a lot of things that really may never see the light of day. You may have to vote on things that you're not interested in voting on or may not have a clear position, but same token, you advocate for the people you represent. I enjoy working with my fellow mayors and supervisors, helping constituents in regards to navigating the laws and the rules of the land here in the state of New York, trying to help small business, and trying to make a difference and represent the people the way they need to be represented. So you take on the role more of an advocate and assisting people on finding their way through the maze of life, which is interesting too, and in a way it actually expands upon some of the things I used to do as mayor.
What is the difference between an assemblyman and a senator?
Assembly members represent, there's 150 assembly members. They represent 125,000 people, give or take, and we're all part of the assembly. The second house of the legislature, because we have a bicameral legislature, is called the Senate. And the senators represent about 300,000 people, so they represent more people. Pros and cons to both, but you have the House and the Senate, you have the House and the Assembly. To get a bill passed, it has to pass identically, same version in both houses before it goes to the governor. The nice part with being an assembly is that because you represent less people, you get to know more people. We're known in the assembly as being the people's house, and rightfully so.
How differently are assembly sessions run how differently are assembly sessions run as opposed to city council meetings?
City council meetings, of course, when I was mayor, I would run the meeting, and it was a very clear agenda. Everybody knew the agenda up front, and you went through, and it was very clear, concise, and absent any major issue, meetings were relatively brief. The assembly, you really don't have the agenda. It's really developed by the leadership, and sometimes we spend an awful lot of time in session deliberating over bills that never have a Senate companion, and therefore they're never going to go anywhere but be in our House. So that's interesting. On the other hand, I have to say, even this year, my second year through, as I listen to the debates and participate in the debates, you become a little bit better educated about the issues. Although you may not support the bill, you at least understand a little bit better and understand where it's coming from.
What is the hardest part working in state government?
In my first year now and a quarter, the hardest part is really becoming acclimated to all the issues that affect our citizens and being knowledgeable about all the legislation that we deal with. When you're mayor, you get to pick your own agenda, what you want to focus on. And that was nice. And after 13 years, I kind of actually had a good handle of what was, didn't have all the answers, but at least had a good idea how to figure it out. In the Assembly, you're exposed to the great diversity of New York State. And New York State is extremely diverse. What is important to upstate New York is not as important to downstate and vice versa. And then we have the western part of the state as well, which has its own set of challenges. So really taking the time and understanding what the issues are is the hardest part, but it's also the most meaningful part.
Explain what is the difference in making decisions for the city and those of the state.
In a city, when you're mayor, you make decisions, and they're impactful and they're probably everlasting. And you're responsible, no matter what the outcome, good or bad. In the legislature, you make a lot of decisions, you vote on a lot of things, a lot of bills, and some go on to become law, but a lot of them don't. And that's kind of the interesting component. But, yet right now we're in the throes of budget. We're doing an awful lot of work on trying to put forth a solid budget for 2014, 2015. We're making decisions that are going to have a positive impact on education, going to have a positive impact in regards to homelessness and job creation and taxes. And hopefully at the end of the day we realize that not everyone's going to be happy, but hopefully people will be able to find something that makes them happy in the budget.
You're a pharmacist at your family-owned pharmacy. How does that help in your career as an assemblyman?
What's helped me both as assembly member and as a mayor is that in my pharmacy, it's retail pharmacy. We're working with people all the time. And by understanding how people react, understanding the issues that they have, it's made me better prepared to be mayor and to also to be patient and to be understanding. I think sometimes we're so quick to judge people when the reality is when you work with people like I have for the last 30 years, you realize that there's challenges and you need to work with them. I think also because of the fact that I'm the only practicing healthcare professional in the New York State Legislature, I've become a source that people go to when there's healthcare related items to say, what do you think about this bill? So although I'm a freshman and technically you have to earn your stripes in certain parts of the healthcare dialogue, I've been a part of it, which is great.
You always seem to be running around. How do you adjust to your pharmacy duties and those of the state assemblyman?
That's the challenge, and it's a balancing act. The good thing is there's 24 hours in a day, and the other good thing is I don't sleep too much. So I'm able to get a lot done in the course of the day, but days like today are a good example. I went to work very early at the pharmacy, went to the legislature after stopping at a couple places to visit constituents on the way down. Got to the legislature by 10, or I was out of session by 1:30. Here I am in Watervliet at 3:30, and I will be in Cohoes at 4, and then back to Albany tonight. So it's a busy day, but I'm very fortunate. As much as you do a lot of running around, my district is overall compact compared to, say, somebody who is representing up in the North Country or the western part of the state where it's very, very widespread out. Okay?
Do you see yourself going on to a higher office?
You know, I'm happy where I am right now. I think, like anything else in life, I was very happy being a pharmacist, and then the opportunity for mayor came up. I was extremely happy being mayor, and the opportunity to go to a higher office came up, but that came after time. I'm one that definitely knows he doesn't know all the answers, and therefore I really need to educate myself on the issues, establish myself as being as a statesperson, as they would say, and we'll see where life brings us. But I'm happy where I am, and I'm happy to be representing the constituents of the 108th Assembly District, particularly here in the city of Watervliet.
What do you think is the biggest issue we have in NYS?
There's a good question. How long is this show? I think we have a couple different issues, and they actually impact the other. We do have major problems with education in regards to funding education properly, but we also have a problem with our property taxes, and property taxes are probably one of the largest things I hear about day in and day out. New York State is a state that advocates for almost everything underneath the sun. We put a lot of rules in place that sometimes go a little bit over the top, and it's not that they weren't well-intentioned, because they are. The problem is that they have unintended consequences. They may cause more regulations for governments or agencies. They may cause more bureaucracy for businesses. So that's kind of always the litmus test for me, is trying to balance those issues. But if I had to sum it up, what are the two biggest issues you hear about on a regular basis? It is taxes and education.
You were just named to a new committee on local government. How does this help your district?
It helps my district because not only am I on local government, but I'm also on the cities committee. And I represent 5 cities. That's more than any other legislator in the New York State Assembly. So it gives me a seat at the table as we're considering legislation that has an impact on cities or local governments. Here, I'm lucky. I have great partners at all levels of leadership in all the cities and the towns. And to be able to work closely with them, and I have a lot of governments. I mean, there's 8 of them that I'm working with, really 10 if you count the overlapping towns and villages of Waterford and Green Island. So I'm pleased to be able to do that. I think my 13 years as mayor, and also my time as president of the New York State Conference of Mayors, working with the hundreds of local governments throughout the state, has prepared me properly for this role.
There has been many recent debates on issues like the SAFE Act, Common Core Education, and tobaccos in stores. Can you tell us about your views on these?
Sure. Let's start off with the SAFE Act. There was a bill that was rushed through, and yes, I voted to support the SAFE Act. There's no doubt about that. It was rushed through based on the tragic shootings over a year ago in Connecticut. When I've been talking about the bill, there are many components of the bill I like. There are a couple that are actually the ones that really have upset people the most, that I wasn't very supportive of, but at the same token, when I look at the full breadth of the district I represent, particularly in the urban areas of South Troy and many of the neighborhoods in the lower wards of the city of Albany, you've got to take efforts to try to stem and slow down gun violence, because innocent people are being killed regularly in those communities. Fortunately, that's slowed down a little bit, but still it's a risk because of all the illegal guns that are out there. And this was an attempt, although I will say it wasn't the best attempt, to try to regulate that. And it's offended a lot of people who really are not only fans of, but are followers and committed to the Second Amendment, which gives you the right to bear arms. We forget what it was like back in the early days of our country, when everybody was walking around carrying guns to protect themselves because of insurrections that they were worried about. So that was actually the first bill I ended up voting on in my first week in office, and it just was a very interesting experience. I do believe over time some of those items need to be amended, need to be tweaked, but I don't think a full repeal is really the best way to go about that, which is what most second gun amendment right individuals are striving for. In regards to Common Core education, that's something that was approved before I came into the legislature, but obviously I'm responsible because of the fact that I've been here during its implementation. The implementation, the rollout has not been good. You have conversions of not only Common Core, you have the issue of teachers' assessments, which is causing great strain on the teachers. You have the gap elimination adjustment, which has really had a negative impact to the finances of the education system. And you have that constant squeeze on property taxes, which has made a perfect storm to make each individual issue its own monstrosity, but putting them together makes it a true catastrophe. We in the Assembly voted 2 weeks ago to put the hold button, not to get rid of Common Core, put the hold button on it to recalibrate, try to evaluate what is the better progression, how do we cut down on some of these unnecessary tests, and how do we help provide what truly is meant to be a better opportunity to educate our children to be prepared for career in college, but we need to do it in a proper format. Tobacco and pharmacies, I own a pharmacy, haven't sold cigarettes in over 25, 30 years now. I don't think pharmacies should carry tobacco products, but at the same token, I'm a business person who also is a retailer. And if there's a legal product out there that can be sold legally, I don't believe we in government should be telling retailers they can't sell tobacco products. As a professional, I've encouraged my colleagues to discourage the use, and recently I introduced a bill that is more focused on, okay, if you're going to sell cigarettes, let's try to shield the appearance of those products so that way we're not having an impact on our children who are maybe in the store either on their own or with their parents, and they see the bright glitzy packaging, which when you look at tobacco displays and you look at candy displays, and they're usually at the same spot at the checkout, you can't tell the difference between the two. My goal is to discourage exposure to the youth by putting this tobacco display legislation in place, and I think it's something that, over time will start to be part of the new norm. That was a lengthy one. You really got your earful there.
Education is a major topic. What do you think needs to be done to address the education problems?
Well, of course, the quick and short answer is add more money, but sometimes that's not always the best answer. Part of the biggest problem we've had in New York State, and it's been going on for 20, 30, 40 years, is not only the amount of money we're spending on education, because we are spending $21.5 billion, soon to be $22.5 billion a year in education, probably, arguably, our second most highest expense as opposed to Medicaid, which is to take care of those who are less fortunate. We need to look at a better redistribution of that support that we send out. Sometimes the areas that have the higher education, that have the higher property tax base, that have the higher, that have the neighborhoods with less needs get more of the money. We need to recalibrate and refocus that money on communities where we have children who come from challenging families and challenging homes, where they can receive the proper education, because we need to give them that path out of poverty, and that is the problem that we see. Far too often, those who live in those rich districts, as they like to call them, they have their path charted for them one way or the other. But in our urban areas where the tax base is shrinking or is relatively stagnant, it makes it difficult to fund education properly, and we need to be very mindful of that. Education for a lot of these children is their only route. And we also, going back to the Common Core discussion, this is why the Common Core is part of the dialogue. We want to make sure when children like yourself move through the school system that when you're in 10th grade, 11th grade, you're starting to think about career in college. And who knows, many people now are actually, and I'm not advocating this, but I'm recognizing this, they're not looking at a college career. They're looking at moving into a career and they want to start earlier because jobs are going to be critical. And I don't think sometimes people put that on the forefront. We want to make sure they're ready to go out into the workforce, whether it's through high school or through college.
How would you suggest local governments, schools do to help consolidate services to save money?
You need to talk. You need to talk, and you need to talk in an open and honest manner. And you need to work to have the foresight to have opportunities. A good example of two things that happened during my tenure as mayor. Here in Watervliet, Mayor Manning and I have a good working relationship. We both come from business backgrounds. And we looked at the housing authorities, both in Cohoes and Watervliet. And we had an opening of the director in Cohoes, and we were saying, geez, do we really need to have that kind of a director? So this is where we built and worked on, with the consent of the boards, of having a shared director working out of both operations. Because the reality is resources are shrinking. We want to put it into the programs, not into personnel. And I believe it's been a success. And of course I'm going to say that because I was mayor at the time. And same token, my last 2 years in office, we worked very hard on a new communications, a new 911 dispatch system, which once again, Mayor Manning, myself, and Sheriff Apple worked on with the support of the county executive and the county legislature. And that has proven to provide significant tax savings to the taxpayers of Cohoes. And at the same token, what it's done is put us in the queue to get more technology upgrades to improve the service. So you need to talk, you need to let the guard down. I'm never one that gets caught up about jobs and parochialism. I'm more about results. And I think many elected officials now are becoming more like that than ever before because the resources are very tight.
What are your views on college education for inmates?
That has gotten a lot of news lately, and it's an interesting topic. The reality is, I think we all agree that when individuals leave incarceration or jails, that there needs to be something for them to do to become sustainable. At the same token, many of the families I talk to and the people I represent are struggling for their children who have not been incarcerated to go to college, and they want to go to college. So my comment on this is I understand what the governor was saying about that. I think he was more looking at a different audience that really would want to hear about this College for Convicts program. But the reality is most individuals who are incarcerated, many of them don't even have a GED. Let's focus on the GED first. Let's focus on supporting higher education for those people not incarcerated. And then in time, when we really feel comfortable, we can go back and take another look at that topic.
What is the DREAM Act?
The DREAM Act is a very interesting aspect. There are many children that are born in this country that are children of immigrants, but they don't have legal status. And the DREAM Act is to provide them the same opportunity that many of our children have here in the state of New York in regards to higher education. It's a very, that too has been a very interesting discussion. I agree with the principles. If a child is born in this state, works in the state, pays taxes in the state, grows up as a teenager just like you're going to be, gets the job at the deli and does his job and pays in the system, there needs to be consideration, but we also need to be mindful, once again, going back to the fact that there are many people who have chosen the path of citizenship, who have chosen the opportunity that should have that right as well. And I think that's where we get into these little push-pull discussions.
What is your position on hydrofracking?
Hydrofracking is an interesting topic. I'm more of let's see what the science provides. Let's make sure that water supplies are not going to be negatively impacted and that it's not going to have a detrimental effect to our economy. It's been long studied. It's still going on. It's probably going to be going on for another 8-9 months. I can tell you that a lot of my colleagues from the mayor's community on the southwest tier in the Jamestown area along the Pennsylvania border are chomping at the bit, because for them it's about jobs, it's about opportunity, it's about keeping farms sustainable. A lot of farmland down there, a lot of farmers going bankrupt because of the pressures and the regulations to deal with. So there are winners and losers in this discussion. It's about making sure that we protect the public health first.
What do you recommend for kids who want to get involved in politics or volunteering in your community? Why do you think it is important?
I think volunteering is probably the first natural step to moving towards a career in politics. People wake up and say, "Oh, I want to be like him or her. I want to be an elected official. How do I get there? Does it take 6 months or a year?" It's not that simple. One, you have to be smart. At least I think that's part of it. But two, you have to be sincere and understanding of what your community is all about. If you're going to represent people, you need to walk their walk and talk their talk. Now, it doesn't mean you have to become homeless. It doesn't mean you have to become addicted to heroin, because that does happen, unfortunately, in your communities. But what it does make sense, is you have to understand them. You have to understand the issues, and you need to do that. And probably the best way to do it is to be just like I was growing up as a kid, ground level, working with community groups, working with your church groups, helping after school, participating in cleanup day, those type of things. You get a little bit of a buy-in and a little bit of skin in the game on your community, and it makes a difference.
Thank you. We really appreciated your time with us.
Well, Jeffrey, Aaron, thank you. I think I'm prepared for almost any interview after the grilling you guys gave me, so I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Who would I consider to be my political role model? That's a good question. I think locally I'd have to say it's Ron Cannistrari. I've known Ron for years. He was the mayor growing up when I was a young lad. He's always handled himself well. One thing I realized here in the Capital Region is we've been blessed to have great elected officials, guys like Mike McDonald, Ron Cannistrari, Jack McEnany, Bob Riley, who always did the honorable and right thing. Sometimes they'd be chastised because they weren't loudmouths. They weren't out there beating their breasts saying, "I'm saving the world." But as I've been in the Assembly now for about 15 months, I found out that they were probably the most respected people amongst their peers, and they did have their impact, and I think that's important. My March Madness NCAA bracket right now is incomplete. I have not spent any time figuring it out. I'm hoping that UAlbany wins its first round game against Florida, but I also sometimes like to dream about winning Powerball, and I think right now the odds are the same for both. But we shall see what happens. I do think at the end of the day you're going to see Louisville and Duke in the final. Duke and Louisville seem to, for some reason, come out of the woodwork whenever you get down to the Final Four, and we shall see what happens. Am I a Yankee or a Red Sox fan? To be honest with you, I'm not really a major fan of baseball, but my son, Liam, loves the Red Sox, so I will be a Red Sox fan today. Golf is actually, when I'm looking for my free time, golf is my only getaway and my only hobby. I do like to run. I need to run. You gotta always keep yourself in shape. I love to work. That's what I love to do. And I love to be with my family. We always look forward to our vacation time away. It's not too often, but when it is, it's very enjoyable. The phone goes away for a little bit. The computer takes a little bit of a rest until the evening, and those are good times.
Take 10 seconds to imagine the face of your best friend, your coworker, your classmate, your hero, the face of a veteran, a senior on a fixed income. Now, I want you to imagine them without a home. More than 2 million people in America rely on public housing to provide a home for their families, and there are at least 500,000 waiting for a safe place to live. I'm Jewel, and I'd like you to join me and rethink how public housing is supporting your community.
Hi, this is Casey Tomasian.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Colonel Lee Schiller of the Watervliet Arsenal.
This is Chief Ron Boysford.
Hi, this is Paul Tonto.
Thank you for watching WVLT, Channel 17.